On today's episode of Max Kelly's Vegan Cooking Show, we're going to be making some vegan versions of classic French pastries, specifically some croissants, some pain au chocolat, and as an added bonus, these weird little cinnamon sugar twist things I made with the excess trimmings.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Alright, so to get things started for our croissants, we're going to make a pre-ferment. Start by adding 450 grams, or about 2 cups of warm, unsweetened, non-dairy milk to a large bowl. Then add 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast and a tablespoon of sugar and whisk to combine. Then whisk in an egg substitute of your choice. I'm using a tablespoon of egg replacer powder, but you can also use 2 tablespoons of ground flax seeds. Give that a whisk to fully hydrate the egg replacer, then slowly stir in 360 grams or about 3 cups of all-purpose flour. You should wind up with a consistency like thick pancake batter. Cover that with plastic or cloth and let it sit at room temperature for 30 minutes to an hour. In the meantime, measure out another 300 grams or 2½ cups of all-purpose flour and stir in about a tablespoon of kosher salt or 2 teaspoons of fine salt. Once the pre-ferment is showing some signs of activity, add 3 more tablespoons of sugar and 2 tablespoons of melted vegan butter. Give that a quick stir, then start adding the flour and salt mixture. Once the flour is fully incorporated, transfer the dough to a clean floured counter and begin kneading. Knead for about 5 minutes or until the dough is smooth and soft with a bit of elasticity. Add flour as needed to keep the dough from getting sticky. Pat the dough into a 9 by 9 inch square, then cover with plastic wrap and refrigerate for 30 minutes to an hour. In the meantime, place 4 sticks of vegan butter in the freezer. After the dough has rested in the fridge, take it out and roll it into a 12 by 12 inch square. Grate all 4 sticks of butter onto the center of the dough using the large holes of a box grater, and arrange the butter into a 9 by 9 inch diamond. Dust the butter lightly with flour, then pull the corners of the dough toward the center and pinch the seams together to seal. You can moisten the dough with some water or milk to help it stick together if necessary. Flip the dough over so the seam side faces down and roll it into a 20 by 10 inch rectangle. Flip the dough over periodically to make sure the layers are even, and dust the dough and rolling pin with flour to keep it from sticking as necessary. Brush off any excess flour, then fold the left edge of the dough toward the center and overlap with the right edge. People say this looks like a business letter, but I'll have to take their word for it. Rotate the dough 90 degrees and fold in half lengthwise so it looks like a little book. Roll the book out again and repeat the entire process. Cover the dough completely with plastic wrap and return to the fridge for 30 minutes. After the dough has rested and chilled, give it one more roll and fold cycle, then return it to the fridge for a full hour. At this point, you can let the dough continue to rest in the fridge for up to 24 hours, or you can divide it in half, refrigerate one portion, and shape and bake the other half on the same day. I'm going to show you the full shape and bake with some dough that's had an overnight rest. Dust the dough, counter, and rolling pin with flour, and roll the dough into a roughly 13 by 20 inch rectangle. Use a pizza wheel to trim the edges as straight as possible, and save the trimmings. We'll be making an easy treat with those in a minute. Now that our dough is a nice neat rectangle, cut it in half lengthwise and into thirds widthwise, which will yield 6 roughly equal smaller rectangles. I'm making 3 pain au chocolat as well, so I'll start by cutting 2 of those rectangles in half and putting 3 of those halves off to the side. Now to make standard croissants, I'll start by cutting the remaining rectangles in half on the diagonal to make triangles. Working with one triangle at a time, make a 1-inch notch at the center of the base, then hold each side and roll the dough toward you. Turn the edges down to make the classic croissant shape, and place on a parchment-lined baking sheet. Repeat with the remaining triangles. To make pain au chocolat, take one of those small rectangles from earlier and give it a little roll just to stretch the dough a bit. As you can probably tell, I'm using chocolate batons that I made myself by brushing some melted dark chocolate onto a parchment sheet and cooling, but you can buy these online or at specialty stores as well. Place one baton on each of the shorter edges of the dough, then roll each edge toward the center to cover the batons with dough. Place seam side down on the baking sheet and repeat to make as many pain au chocolat as desired. Arrange your shaped croissants on the baking sheet, then cover and return to the fridge for a half hour and preheat your oven to 425 degrees. You can actually freeze some croissants at this point, then thaw and bake them later. Place as many as you want to freeze in a large freezer bag, get as much of the air out as you can, and set the bag on a small baking sheet so they don't slide around and stick together in the freezer. When you want to bake them, place them on a parchment-lined baking sheet, cover with plastic wrap, and allow them to thaw overnight in the fridge before following the final steps to bake. The croissants should stay fresh in the freezer for at least 1 or 2 months. Now, as promised, the easy treat. Fill a medium bowl with around 3 tablespoons of sugar, 1 tablespoon of ground cinnamon, and a half teaspoon of ground cloves. Cut the dough trimmings into roughly equal strips, then toss them with the sugar mixture until generously coated. Twist the strips together in pairs like so, arrange on another parchment-lined baking sheet, and sprinkle with any excess sugar mixture. Let these rest covered with a cloth, then when your oven has finished heating, bake at 425 degrees for 15 minutes, then lower the heat to 350 degrees and bake for another 5 or 10 minutes until nice and brown. Remove from the oven and cool on a wire rack, and feel free to snack while you're waiting for the croissants. Make sure to return the oven to 425 degrees once you've finished baking these. After the croissants have chilled for a half hour, remove them from the fridge and allow them to proof at room temperature for about an hour. Then bake them for 15 minutes at 425 degrees, then lower the oven to 350 degrees and bake for another 10 to 15 minutes. Remove from the oven and allow to cool on a wire rack for at least 20 minutes. If desired, you can replicate the shine that you'd get from an egg wash by brushing the croissants with some melted refined coconut oil right after you take them out of the oven. They taste best fresh out of the oven, but they should stay reasonably fresh, lightly covered on the counter for up to 2 days. Enjoy! I want to give a special thanks to everyone who weighed in on the Vegan Connecticut Facebook group to help me decide which video to make this week. As always, please leave a comment if you have any questions or if you have a specific recipe that you'd like to see in the future, and like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.